Blake, have you ever dressed up as Justin Timberlake for a Sweet 16 party?
Well, my wife did arrange for a sleepover with him when she was younger, so yes.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech director out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who was married to a woman that thought she could just go to his house when she was 5 years old. And I'm here with my boss, who could get an invite to JT's house in Franklin at any moment he wanted, Toby Walters.
Timberlake doesn't live in Franklin. He lives in Leapers Fork.
Oh my, you are splitting the split hair on a split hair there.
That's like you saying you live in Brentwood, but you actually live in Nashville. Nice try, buddy.
Well, I actually found out recently the reason that I live in Nashville is because the housing developer wasn't going to build that neighborhood unless it had a Nashville address. So that's why my neighborhood makes no sense.
Well, you make no sense, so the two go together.
Sure, let's go with that.
So, Blake, I've assumed you've had many jobs in the past.
Yes, currently trying to figure out my current one. But yes, a lot of jobs.
Yeah, what is your current job?
Well,
because
according to Philo, I get paid to do nothing.
Yeah, no, that was a Gage.
Well, at Philo. So, oh my gosh, no, that was at the MXU after party.
See,
no, it was the Amplio after party.
Oh my goodness,
There's too many events. I can't remember them all.
So I was thinking of all the jobs I've had before starting a company, and I was talking with my wife last night trying to name them. So I'm going to go through them just real quick. I started as an after-school daycare program helper. Can you imagine me with elementary kids trying to wrangle them?
I'm just imagining you punching a 5-year-old and it's like you getting arrested.
I never punched a 5-year-old. Let's be very clear about that.
I don't know.
I was a babysitter, restaurant server, skin testing research subject. I once got paid $3,000 to stay in a hospital for a week so they could test skin products on me.
Well, that explains a lot about other things on your person.
Yep. I was a courier. I worked with a couple different small local integrators. I was a youth pastor. Oh, that was fun.
Just keep punching kids.
I know. Worship leader, recording and mastering engineer, studio wiring guru. I don't know if that's a job title.
I was going to say, you gave yourself that title, though,
I did
sure.
some serious soldering, that's for sure.
That's actually some nice alliteration.
And then my favorite one was, this was right before I got married. I was trying to get any job possible just to like pay the bills full time so I could marry my wife and not be a total deadbeat. Even though my wife might say like, well, we got married and you were still a deadbeat, but I love you anyways.
Goodness.
I know. She's very sweet to me. But,
is that?
But I took a job as a singing telegram-ist person.
Did you do this for more than one day?
So the first one, it was a company that like hired out singing telegram people. So somebody would call in and say, hey, I want somebody to go to my office and embarrass this person for their birthday, whatever it was. And this company would offer like a variety of styles and personas. So I don't know what ones I qualified for. I think the owner of this company wrote me down as like can do Elvis and, you know, like rock and roll stuff. And I said, sure, why not? And so the first one she sent me on was a ex-boyfriend was trying to win back his girlfriend. And so he sent me as a singing telegram. And so I went and I sang Pretty Woman to this girl to try and win her back for him.
How old are you in this moment?
23.
Serenading a 16-year-old on behalf of her
No,
boyfriend.
she wasn't 16. This was a different story.
Oh, okay.
This is
a grown woman?
This is part B. So, I mean, she was in her 20s as well. So I sang Pretty Woman, and I said, you know, this is on behalf of John, or whatever the guy's name was. And she's like, oh, really? She's like, I haven't heard from him in a couple months. I was like, John, come on,
that
dude.
That makes sense, though, for the kind of person that would send a freaking singing telegram.
Yeah, so I couldn't understand how me singing Pretty Woman to her was going to win her back for him, who hadn't even called her in 2 months. I was like, dude, let's...
He was really banking on your voice, Tobes.
Yeah, I guess so. So the second one was the owner of the company called me up and said, hey, I've got a Sweet 16 party, and I want you to be Justin Timberlake because that's what they've ordered. And I'm just like, oh, no. Like, you know what? I quit.
I was going to say, how long did you work there?
I straight up quit at that point because I was like, I'm not going to a Sweet 16 party and being Justin Timberlake.
Well, yeah, that's fraught with conflict. Back in high school, the Latin Club would sell singing telegrams, and you could pay to have someone interrupt another class for the day and just sing at any moment. Well, the Latin people were pretty jokestery. I came from there. I wasn't in the club, though, but I was in Latin class. And
did you interrupt a class to sing?
Oh, no, you don't want that.
No,
but,
you don't.
So the thing is like they had all day off from class. So even if they didn't have singing telegrams, they would just bust into a random one, pick a random student and say, "We are here to sing Afternoon Delight to you." And would sing Afternoon Delight.
That's so inappropriate.
Well, so they did it to a lot of the older teachers, like the old teachers, that didn't know what the song meant. So anyways, it's nice to hear you had a lot of jobs before this one.
Yes. Thanks, Latin Club.
Yeah, it prepared you very well. There's another man who has also had a million jobs before he was becoming the production director and the whatever else Pastor asked for at Without Walls in Mesa, Arizona, Jeff Watkins.
Mesa, Arizona.
Is it Mesa?
Mesa, Arizona.
Is it not Mesa?
Is it Mesa? Is it Mesa or Mesa?
It's Mesa.
You know what you need to do, Toby? We need to have a surprise game where it's pronunciation with Blake and just have 6 words.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
But you would be surprised at how many times we get Mesa.
But it's Mesa.
I think it's just Mesa with like an asterisk at the end.
Well, it's how it's pronounced in Spanish. Mesa.
In my defense, it's M-E-S-A. I mean,
in your defense, that's what you put before everything you say.
Well, I do come with a disclaimer. Every day, my shirt, it just says "in my defense," and then it's small font. Licensed to say whatever he wants. So
that would be a great church gear merch.
Oh,
yeah,
in my defense.
Yeah. Oh, that's a perfect tech shirt because everybody's always coming up to the tech and complaining. Yeah. And it's just like the shirt says, "In my defense, Pastor told me to do this." Like in your case, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you could have like in the small font going all the way down. It could be in the format of like the Star Wars scroll.
Yeah.
Okay. I like this a lot.
I love it. I think we rabbit trailed, but that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most of our best ideas come from rabbit trailing on this podcast.
That's what we should call this podcast. Blake and Toby's Rabbit Trails.
Oh, boy. Full of rabbit pellets. All right, Jeff. So we've got your 5 truths and a lie. You're from Arizona. In my experience, I like all the people from Arizona, so I don't think you're going to lie to us because you're too good a guy. What do you think?
Even Mesa, Arizona?
I'm a pastor's son-in-law, so I'm not allowed to lie.
That's true. And are you presently recording in your church?
Yes.
See, that would be a double sin.
Oh, man.
You can't.
It's closed today because of one of those holidays. I don't remember what today is. But
is today a holiday?
It is.
Not at church gear. Get to work.
Well, hang on. It's Columbus/Indigenous Peoples Day. So then if the church is closed for a holiday, is it still church?
And can you lie?
And it's even without walls church. So like, wouldn't the church then be where the people are?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, you're the first one that didn't say, wait, you don't have walls.
Oh my gosh.
All
right, let's figure out this lie.
So
what if they're all truths because he's in a church and he's a pastor's son-in-law? We'll find out.
Well, and if he's without walls, he can't lie anywhere because apparently the church is everywhere. All right, number 1. He once worked with Al Pacino and Sylvester Stallone. Now, don't we have someone else that worked with Al Pacino?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what the context worked with them doing what. So we'll find out.
A hit job. Number 2 was a professional chef for 12 years before getting into production. I buy this 100% by the look at him. He looks like someone that would be in the white coat.
Careful.
What?
Basically, he just said I was fat.
I know.
What are you talking about? Okay.
Never trust a skinny chef.
Right now, the worship pastor at the church I grew up at is on Hell's Kitchen. And he is the most attractive dude. So when I think of a chef, I think of him. So I was not going there. All right. Number 3.
Are you saying that Jeff's not an attractive dude?
I'm saying that that's my comp for a chef. So it's calling someone a chef is a compliment.
Jeff, do you have any experience in branding and marketing?
Oh, God.
Because we may be hiring at Church Gear.
That's great.
Somebody did cold call me and say there was an opening.
Okay, real talk. I got a recruiter email the other day, and it was from Guitar Center.
Oh.
That really cracked me up. All right.
You should take that one.
Yeah, sabotage. Number 3, I've tracked drums for Lifetime movies. Number 4, my father-in-law played piano for
Is
Elvis.
this the same father-in-law that is his pastor?
Oh, wait, is your father-in-law your pastor?
My father-in-law is my pastor.
And his wife's the worship leader.
No way.
Yes.
No.
So, 2 bosses.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Can you imagine the expectations on his shoulder?
I instantly feel so much sympathy. That's awful.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5, I went to college to become
Use your words.
I don't know how to say that.
A podiatrist. Do you know what a podiatrist is?
I thought that was a potterus. It's like, is this some kind of clay thing?
Blake, when you have a problem with your foot, you go see a podiatrist.
You just cut your foot off.
It's a foot doctor.
Just like the Civil War. Number 6, was once a tech director and the drummer at the same time.
Dude, who else was mixing and playing drums at the same? Oh, that was Drew mixed and led worship at the same time.
So then did you have to hate your own self for the kick drum mic?
Well, assuming this is true.
Yeah.
Assuming this is true.
Okay. Toby, what's your gut telling you?
This is tricky.
I think this is really hard.
I'm gonna go with number 5. I do not believe he went to college to become a podiatrist. If we believe that he was a chef,
I am tracking right there with you. I think that he's doubled up there and he's caught himself. So I'm gonna hang with you. I'm gonna grab your foot, ride your foot tails. All right, Jeff, we're locking in on the podiatrist. Are we right?
You're right. I didn't even know what a podiatrist was. It popped up on a commercial when I was writing this down, and I'm like, oh, that sounds good.
neither did Blake.
There you go.
Am I the only smart one on this podcast?
Well,
What's a podcast?
Apparently so. The rest of us are production directors.
Not Blake.
I was gonna say.
Blake is the opposite of a production director.
I have so much confidence, though. I'd love us to film a bit at a church where I get to just do the tech and see how long I could convince
That'd be
them.
amazing, like some sort of fundraising competition where Blake gets to be production director for a day at a church.
My first step is I'm just going to pay Corey Edwards to come with me that day. I mean, he's in Nashville.
I've always said I think it would be great if like the worship team and the production team just swapped for the day. It's volunteer recruitment.
We've asked that question before as far as like who would do better. And I think I've got to go with production. Even though they'll hate being on stage, they still got way more skill. Come on, let's be honest.
Well, all right. I got to know about Al Pacino.
My team sounds like a bunch of cats in a bag. So
Your
I'm
wife?
not sure we want them. No, my production team.
Oh,
So we definitely don't want them leading worship.
there you go.
A bag his wife and father-in-law are kicking. So tell us about working with Al Pacino and Sylvester Stallone.
So years ago, so short version, I actually started a photography company about 10 years ago. That's kind of how I got into this whole thing, very loosely. But I got this job with a company in Los Angeles. Had no idea what it was. It was this like, come photograph this event kind of thing. Fast forward, they let me know it was Pacino and Stallone later. It ended up being like this big scam of like, make $1 billion by selling water or like something really, really lame. And they basically had just paid them to be there and like pitched this whole thing. So it was really interesting. But yeah, I photographed Al Pacino and Stallone for like 3 or 4 days, I think.
That's cool. Did you get to talk to him?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I actually, funny story, I went to this is well early on in my career of anything professional production, but Stallone had like a little, his collar was like curled up and he had a little spot on it. Well, we were taking photos. It's Stallone. Like you don't want that in a photo, right? So I reached up and was just going to adjust his collar. Yeah, bad move. The handler swiped me down like I was attacking the White House. Like it was absolute nuts.
This is happening often on the podcast where tech directors are literally, we've got 2 different moments of people getting thrown into the wall from the Secret Service.
And Beyonce, her.
Well, we don't have, no.
Maybe I'm getting stories mixed up.
Yeah, not Bosma. Oh my gosh.
Joe Bonamassa?
No.
Bosma? You and words.
Scott Ragsdale.
Yeah.
He was with Joan Bonamassa. He deleted Beyonce's file, but he didn't get attacked because they didn't know.
But Secret Service has thrown our guests into walls before.
Like multiple. We've hired one of them.
With Stallone, did he like manhandle you, or was it his like
Oh no,
security
it
guy?
was like a handler, and Stallone like leaned over to the handler. Was like, "Hey, calm down."
Because I figure Stallone can handle himself.
I was
That
gonna
guy is
say.
ripped.
Oh yeah, for sure. But he is like the sweetest guy ever. I know that sounds weird, but it's not what you would expect, like in like a real person environment. Like he's so kind, so sweet. He was like, "Hey, just leave him alone."
He's like, hey, did you see all those punches I took to the face in Rocky? I'm good.
He's like, "I've got something on my collar."
So
Let's
your
fix it.
your father-in-law played for Elvis?
Yeah, so that was another funny story. When I first started dating my wife, we were in Colorado, and she gave me all these stories. Oh yeah, I did this, whatever, whatever. I thought she was just trying to like impress me or whatever, you know. So I was a musician for a while, studio musician for a while. So I just thought this was a story she was trying to, throw out there. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I remember at Christmas, I think it was like our first Christmas together. I was like, so your daughter tells me you played piano for Elvis. He's like, oh yeah. And he starts telling like these stories of playing for Elvis and the Grand Ole Opry and like all this other stuff. So yeah, it wasn't a lie, even though I thought it was.
That is insane. I guess the last one I want to hit before we get to questions was you were a tech director and drummer at the same time.
Yes. And that was interesting. That oddly enough wasn't too long ago, maybe like 5 years, 6 years ago. I was when we moved here, I've been a drummer my whole life, but when we moved here, I started playing drums, and the guy previous to me ended up moving on, and I was a tech director and the drummer at the same time. So I would literally like text in the middle of the like between songs, hey, throw up this slide, pull down this slide. Why is this light on?
Wait,
Kick
you
drum
did this
sounds
for,
like
I thought this was like an emergency service. You did this for like
no.
multiple years?
Yeah, I did this. I don't know how long, maybe like a couple years.
This sounds horrific.
Yeah, I would come in like before service and get everything set up. This was obviously, we had a smaller team and production really wasn't, let's say, at a level that we are today. So I wasn't like programming, 80 lights and then playing drums kind of thing. So yeah, I did it for a couple years. It was kind of crazy. I wouldn't do it again, that's for sure.
You wouldn't recommend it either.
Not recommended. But in my defense, it's not recommended.
Well, he did do a lot of jobs, so he was like, I got to do two at once.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jeff, I feel like you and I have a lot in common as far as we have a long storied past of how we got to the job we're in today, which involved many, many things not like what we're doing today. Give us a little backdrop of all these different things you went through and how they helped you become a production director now.
Yes, I think I'm a jack of all trades, as my wife would say. I actually went to school to be a chef. I was a chef for like 10 or 12 years, hotels and resorts across the country. Loved it. Had obviously learned a ton. Fast forward, my son was born with some medical issues, and I ended up leaving that just to kind of be with him with surgeries, things like that. I took another job that kind of allowed that, and then I was fired. And I could not find a job. The only this is funny. The only job offer I got was from Edible Arrangements. You know, that company that carves like fruit flowers. Yeah. I did not take it. So I ended up starting my own business with like $4 in the bank. Literally bought a camera from Target, went and took some photos of a family and then returned it to Target because I couldn't afford to keep it. I did this like 4 or 5 times.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy until I got to a place to, where I could afford to keep the camera. So that exploded. I own my own photography business still do. Still active in that for several years. That was a little over 10 years ago, I think. And then I got the call up to this production thing. The exact words, "Hey, you're next in line."
Because they just burned through that many people?
No. We had a gentleman here that was, he was here for a very long time, super talented. They had moved on. Production was kind of different then. Like it looked different in the church at that time than it does now. So they had moved on. And my father-in-law was like, "Hey, you're next in line." I'm like, "Okay." Thought DMX was a rapper. And then
so does Blake.
slowly figured out it wasn't.
He's not? Okay. So then, had you been volunteering for all that time? Because I'm
Yeah,
assuming.
I was a volunteer for, like 6 years as a volunteer production director.
Okay,
Um,
I was gonna say, like, it doesn't sound as if you would go from, yeah, I'm returning this camera to Target back and forth to, oh, well,
no,
they just
no.
picked my name out of a hat and I'm the production guy now, because that's how we do that.
Yeah, no. I had kind of learned a lot over several years as a volunteer and as owning my own business and doing things outside of the church. So I'd got to a place, again, production was completely different then when I took it over than it is now. So I still didn't know very much when it came to the church production world. But I do enough to, I guess, be dangerous.
So, well, that's my tagline right there. Like,
That's your
I know
job title.
just enough to be dangerous.
Right.
Well, tell us, like, what's it like being, the production director at Without Walls Church and the team there? And I mean, how steep of a learning curve did you have when was your first year just the worst year ever, and it's been getting better since? Like,
Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say it was the worst year ever in the sense of like, I hate this, but kind of previous to me, there was a lot of like, hey, let's just get what we need now. Like, we have this need, let's fill it kind of thing. There wasn't very much, I guess you could say, like forward thinking when it came to the production mindset. So when I took over, there was a massive learning curve. There was a lot of things that needed to be changed pretty quick. For example, like our first video room was in an air conditioner closet with no AC. So it
did it overheat?
there's a lot of, and in Arizona, 120 degrees in the summer. So
Mesa, Arizona.
Yeah, you just like open the door and there's a puddle like of gear left. It's just dissolved.
It was a mesa.
Oh, the doom ching.
So yeah, there was a big learning curve, but it was fun. I mean, I wouldn't take those days for the world because I think you learn a lot more when you're kind of up against a wall. You know what I mean?
And how about your team? What does your team look like as far as like size and makeup and a lot of volunteers? Do you have other staff members?
Yeah, so I lead a team of about 30, ranging age-wise from very young in the 14, 15 age range to, I don't want to say very old, but very mature. We have some that are 65.
Father.
Yeah.
Wise.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to say seasoned because when they came, they knew nothing about production. So they weren't seasoned in the production aspect, but they were seasoned in the maturity aspect. So yeah, I lead a team of 30. I have 2 other staff members on production, A1, A2, assistant production director. So yeah, it's a large team. Large for us, larger than we've ever had before. In the early days, it was like 4.
How long did it take you to grow that volunteer team up like that?
Probably about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, if you consider COVID in the middle of that, like things we were different than most churches, at least from what I can see, is we really exploded kind of through COVID, like production wise, out of necessity. And then kind of really a vision casting, like before that, my pastor kind of came to me in, I guess that was like the end of 2019. It was like, hey, I'm really feeling this. Like, I'm really feeling God is telling us to kind of lean into this as far as production goes, like our online campus, et cetera, et cetera. So we made a ton of upgrades before we knew COVID was a thing. And then it just kind of blew up. So our team really grew over the next couple of years.
Well, it makes sense that it blew up during COVID because you didn't have walls. So like,
Right.
COVID wasn't as rampant or a threat when you got all that ventilation going on.
We are really strong with the puns this morning.
Well,
right.
what
I'm
can I
used
say?
to it.
Yeah.
We get it a lot. Walls.
Yeah, Blake, maybe you should start having kids because you got the dad jokes dialed in.
I got puns, hun.
Yeah.
Is this the moment where I announce my wife's pregnant? That would be funny.
You did just say your wife informed you yesterday that most of the things you say about her on the podcast are untrue.
My memory is really bad, so I will always like slightly, it's not like I'm lying, it's that I think of it and then I remember it like the opposite way. Well, I guess that's a lie. It's not intentional. Okay.
So I think you touched on this.
Stop while you're ahead.
Yeah, quit while you're ahead.
I love that you assume I was ever ahead.
Yeah, that's your t-shirt. I should have quit while I was ahead. So Jeff, you kind of alluded to this, that your pastor said, "Hey, let's step into the next era as far as production setup." And this is your father-in-law, so you can't necessarily tell him no. I mean, I guess you can.
Yeah, he can. He's already stole his daughter. I mean, he pretty much does whatever he wants.
So a lot of our listeners and tech directors at churches have lived through this. Like, pastors have often major vision. That's why they're the lead pastor, because they have this vision, and then they hand it to their tech people and say, "Can you make this a reality?" So was that kind of your story, where pastor had a huge vision? He's like, "Hey, can we make this a reality?" And tell us what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, to a sense, for sure. I think it's the same with every pastor, kind of, when it comes to that. Like, hey, I really want to do this, and it's your job to make it happen. The most important thing in that I realized, obviously with a different dynamic because he is my father-in-law, but the most important thing through that process was conversation and open dialogue. The answer is always yes. He's the pastor, but that doesn't mean there aren't, several steps before the yes, if that makes sense. So sure, we can do X, Y, Z, but this is where we're at, and this is what it would take to get there, kind of thing. So I think those conversations, and whether they know anything about tech or whether they don't, like, I'm fortunate enough that our pastor has a good idea, like, in the big picture of what production looks like, because he kind of lived in the music industry for a while. So having that conversation, open dialogue of, absolutely, we can do this, but this is what it looks like to get there. And if what it looks like to get there is $20 or is it $2 million, like, being clear on what that is, really, really helps. That doesn't mean every conversation is pleasant, and it doesn't mean it doesn't come back with, like, hey, let's figure out how to get it done now. But I like to always say, like, yes, but, if that makes sense. So it's really been beneficial, and those conversations have obviously expanded and developed over time to where they're easier sometimes. But always having a yes, but, if there needs to be one, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, and give us a little picture of before and after. What was the production setup like when you had these conversations with your pastor father-in-law? And then, what are you guys doing today, or even almost doing today, you're working towards now?
Yeah, so I remember, like, the first cameras we ever used here were like some Sony record tape cameras. We were having to, like, digitize that tape with, like, the fuzz and the audio and everything surrounding it. I mean, it was.
And was this like 10 years ago?
This was about 10-ish years ago. And they were even old at that point. Like, it was pretty, for lack of better description, I appreciate those days, but it was not good at all. From a quality standpoint. So kind of visiting those things, saying, like, hey, this is where we want to go, but this is what it takes to get there. We don't have, X amount of thousands of dollars to dump into it now. But this is what a next step could look like. So we went from that to, like, some, camcorders. We were there for a while. And then it really started. I like to put it this way. Our church was a church that just streamed our services. We were never really an online campus. Like, there wasn't any, what would the word be? There wasn't any, like, focus on, hey, you're a part of our church. It was just like, hey, if you're home, you can watch, kind of thing. So when that really flipped, and our pastor got the vision of, like, hey, there's something here. Like, there's some time we need to dedicate here. There's some finances we need to dedicate here for this reason. Like, there's people to reach on the other side of a camera. Like, once he realized that and kind of cast that vision, then those steps became easier, in a sense. So yeah, going from, like, really old equipment that we were using to the best of our abilities and at an excellent level at the time, to where we are now. I like to say any upgrade that you make or any decision that you make should always be forward thinking. That was a big stumbling block for us. So once we decided to, like, change things up, whether it be with different gear or, how we do things, let's turn the lights off during worship, kind of thing, which we lost like 100 people, by the way, when we did that. It's like, you're going to hell, the lights are off. always be forward thinking in those processes, for what does this decision look like, and 2 years from now or 3 years from now. So from then to now is a drastic difference, equipment wise and just environment wise, as far as what we do.
And was step one telling your pastor, well, the first thing we should do is go to Target on a Saturday, buy the cameras we need, and then just return them on Monday?
Return them on Monday. Yes, that was the first step. Actually, the first step was a lunch and a conversation. And his exact words, I'm not going to dive crazy deep in that conversation, but I basically said, like, hey, I love this, but I really see some opportunity here. His exact words were, cool, do something about it. Which is probably the scariest thing I could have ever heard, because again, I thought DMX was a rapper. So our first big step was turning the lights off and like adding a hazer and like doing a little stage design, which involved hanging like picture frames from the ceiling. I look at it now and it was like atrocious, but it was a step,
Well, they say if you don't look back and cringe upon how you acted and your skill level, then you're not advancing. So it's a weird way reflection, because you want to be disappointed in the past, because that means you're getting better in the future. So tell us about, like, just peel back another layer, if you will, on carrying out a pastor's vision when that's your father-in-law. Like, that is such a fascinating dynamic. Like, your father-in-law's the pastor, your wife's the worship pastor. Like, I can't imagine anyone else has that situation. And it sounds like a lot of production problems, and by problems I mean like the interpersonal stuff, can come from communication breakdowns with the pastor and the production guy. So I mean, now he's your father-in-law. You're seeing him at Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that in between. What's that like?
It's obviously grown from the very beginning. I'll be completely transparent. It was difficult in the beginning because it is family. Like, how do you separate family from church, and how do you separate family from job? And in reality, when you realize like this is our family and this is what we do, like there isn't really a separation. I think it's not being fair to what we're called to do in ministry to try to separate that. That doesn't mean that we don't put a halt on things, hey, let's not talk about it around the Thanksgiving table. But there's been tons of growth through that process. I think for our unique situation, like being able to talk a little more freely, I think it's helped the growth process a lot when it comes to like, what does production look like in our church? And let's be frank, there's things that it's not about what I want, like as a production director, hey, I think this would be cool or that would be cool. It's about, what vision has God given our pastor, and how can I facilitate that? There's things that, frankly, that I don't like, but it doesn't matter. Like, there's things that I would probably do different, but if it comes down and pastor's like, hey, this is how I want it and why, then I look past that. It's all about facilitating the vision that God's given him, and being a son-in-law and being my father-in-law. That relationship has, at this time, I guess as a first tech director position, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been really cool. The growth has been awesome in that process.
I was going to say, like, I'm sure that was tough initially, but now that you've been in it for a while, is it almost like, oh, now this is how you do it? Is your pastor's your father-in-law?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the level of trust is the most important thing there. Like previous, there were times like, hey, I need to buy this for this reason. I need to replace 5 light bulbs. And this was obviously in the early days. Now it's like, hey, we need this for this reason. And the level of trust that's there, he trusts that I'm being a good steward financially. And he also trusts that I've done the research, or I've spent the time of, looking at whatever that specific need is at the time to, he knows I got his back, So yes, it's definitely grown from day one to now. And it meshes really well. Like, I have a blast with it.
You ever use the line, if you don't trust me with this, but you trust me with your daughter? What are you saying here?
Oh, but that's a really good one.
Let
me write that down.
That's free.
Okay, Jeff. So your father-in-law pastor gives you a huge vision and then, entrusts you to make it happen. I'm assuming that back when you're doing these, Sony cameras to tape, that you didn't have the same team that you have today. Did you have to build a team, first of all, in order to facilitate that vision? And what was your process to go about that, to put that team together?
Yes, we definitely built a completely different team. There's a couple of guys that have stuck around and have been here for like the long haul, which I think is really cool for them because every now and then I'll throw up like, "Hey, do you remember?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." So I think the appreciation for what we do and like the appreciation for the why, like the big why, it's really cool to still have a couple of people that are part of that and have been a part of like the long road, if that makes sense. As far as building a team, I got a couple different approaches, but my big approach to building a team, I guess, is different stages, I would say. My first piece of advice is don't only look for people with experience. I think if you're, a lot of times you get stuck on like, "Oh, have you done this before? Have you done anything in church before?" It gives you a lot of bad habits to break, if that makes sense. Bad habits for like what you're looking for. So be open to like whoever's willing and able, I guess, if that makes sense. I've found like some of our, when I say best volunteers, I don't mean that like one is higher than the other. I mean like one's ability maybe more well-rounded when it comes to everything. Some of our best volunteers are the ones that I would have never thought, if I'm being honest, I would have never thought would have been a great fit in a production team. We have a couple of people, they're really good on camera 1. They absolutely stink on camera 4, but they know that, like 1, they nail it and I'm going to use them to train everybody on 1. I'm never going to put them on 4. We'll close Sunday service before they touch it. But like knowing those strengths and them knowing those strengths, one of the first things I tell a team member is like, "Hey, we're going to find out where your strengths are. We're also going to find out where your weaknesses are. And I'm going to communicate that. I'm not going to candy coat it. And I'm going to say like, hey, you're really, really strong here. You're not so strong here." And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. Let's use you to your strengths because you're going to be more comfortable and you're going to do a better job at it. And it'll be less stressful than me putting you somewhere that you hate or you're not any good at. You know what I mean?
Oh, on like a technical sense, why on earth is someone great at camera 1 and not 4? Like, is it the angle? That seems like that'd be transferable.
It can be. So like for us, camera 1 is follow cam. So it's our main cam. That specific person I'm talking about just has like the eye, they're smooth. They follow pastor like perfectly, even in a worship sense. They're zoom focus. Like we run everything manual. So their zoom focus is quick. Their follow the worship leader is quick, but 4 is a roamer. So like there's a completely different aspect. It's all handheld. Everything's fast paced. Everything is quicker. There's a lot of whips and things like that. So that person would not translate well to camera 4 because they're better at that slower pace to a sense.
I just love this concept of helping people find their strengths and also recognize what they're not great at. So I struggle in hard conversations. I don't like uncomfortable situations. I'm an Enneagram 7, so I like it to be all fun and light. Now, Blake is an Enneagram 8, so he's constantly like, "Hey, you suck at this and this and this." And so I think it's, if you married... I'm not going to marry you, Blake.
Oh, man, this is getting deep.
If you put Blake and I's skills together... And, I love...
Toby, get off of one knee. Get off of one knee. Put that ring away.
So I just love the concept of helping people find their strengths and living in them and realize, hey, you don't have to be great at everything because God didn't design us that way. And so I think that's such an important element of building a great team is having people live in their strengths.
Absolutely. And I think that was important for me to realize. Like early on, I was hey, I've got to do it all kind of guy. And that will beat you up so quick and throw you to the wolves. I can't do it all. I'm not great at everything. My strengths aren't everything. So soon, or realizing like, hey, I'm really good at this. Like my strong points are lighting and video. I can run a good mix. I'm good at audio, but it's definitely not my number one, right? So realizing that and realizing, okay, my assistant production director, their audio or their strength needs to be audio. I don't really care if they're that great. great at video or lighting, like they need to know it, but being able to feed off that, it's kind of like a marriage, if that makes sense. You've got to know where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are in order to carry out a vision that you've been given.
Well,
Or a vision that's a goal. Yeah.
that makes sense, Toby. I'm your work wife. You've heard that phrase
Work
before, right?
Ew. Ew.
So Jeff, I love like a lot right there of what you're saying. I almost wonder if you were writing a book to give to Tex, if one of the chapters at the beginning is not when you realize you can't do it all. That sounds like probably an aha moment that I bet everyone has. And then the next chapter would probably be building a team.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing when you realize you can't do it all, because I mean, there's a lot, we could talk about that for hours. There's a lot in that, just realistically, like with us, and there's also a lot biblically. You can't do it all. Like, you weren't designed to do it all. We were designed to create relationships, and we were designed to create community. And I think that has to be carried out in a production element as well. And it allows your relationships to be stronger and deeper, and it allows you to achieve a goal, or carry out a vision in a grander level of excellence, if that makes sense. I kind of have a saying, like, if your level of excellence should be different every week. If your this week is the same as last week, then you're number one, you're not doing yourself justice, and number two, we're not doing what God's called us to do. And specifically speaking, production, but your level of excellence should be growing and should be greater week after week after week. So that's one thing that I push pretty hard with our team, and I think with the relationships, the community, I think it helps us grow better, deeper, stronger. Isn't that a song?
Sure. Faster, better, stronger. That
Yeah.
don't kill me. Yeah, it's a great song.
Is
Yeah,
it by DMX?
yes, something like that.
Oh my gosh.
DMX. Yes.
So let's make a quick pivot here, Jeff. You seem to be blowing up the internet right now, and it's not your TikTok dance videos.
Although those are very good.
Yes, it's whenever you post in these worship and tech media groups, and you're posting pictures of your new gear that you're getting in, and
Oh my
people are
God.
freaking out. Like, A, how did you get that? And B, like, why in the world do you need that? Because it's such beautiful equipment coming in. So can you just give us a little, behind the scenes, like, what are you guys actually putting in these days? Drop some
Sure.
names.
And it's funny story. I'm not going to name any names, but when they listen to this podcast, and they'll know that I'm talking to them. But I get a few DMs. Hey, they're going to really freak out when I post our gear shots next week. But yeah, it's funny because people are so attached to like what the side of a camera says. And they could really care less about the process. They could really care less of where we came from. They don't consider like the steps that we took to get there. Most recently we just put in red cameras, like phase 1 red cameras, I think 2 weeks ago. That really hit some hot buttons. Oh my God, why do you need this in church? Like yada, yada, yada. I'm like, yo, dude, remember or don't remember. You didn't even know I came from Sony to tape cameras 10 years ago. Like, in the grand scheme of things, like it's not about what you have. It's about what you have to facilitate the vision that you've been called to do. So, or your pastor's kid or whatever it may be. Right. So our first big investment was Black Magic. We went into Black Magic knowing that it was kind of a step one. I told our pastor, like, hey, this is a great entry level. Like, this is a great first step considering from where we've come from. And we put a time frame on that. Like, hey, in 3 to 5 years, we want to be able to pass this gear along in good condition, working quality to another church that can facilitate their vision. And we can, frankly, we can sell it to a point to invest in our next phase. So our next phase, I'm not going to say was always red cameras, but like looking at that from a cinematic perspective and kind of the things that we're trying to achieve in our style, it was a good fit. That doesn't mean there weren't other good fits, but it was a good fit for us. And it may not be a good fit for the next church. So that's the most recent. Before that, we've done a lot in the last couple months. We just finished house lighting. That was more out of a need. No one gets excited about house lighting.
Especially when you turn it off.
Yeah. My integrator and I were like, man, this is like the hardest project just because it's not exciting. But then once we got finished, I go, this is the most exciting project that I've done. just because of the dynamic and like the what's the word, like the effect that it had on overall from a weekday where nobody's here except for 5 people or 10 people to a Sunday where we're able to kind of put that in the environment, and it's just another level, another layer of what we're able to do. So those have kind of been our 2 big things. We did an LED wall a couple weeks ago. So there's been a lot going on recently, but I would say in the last like 2019 to now, it's been several steps of kind of achieving that vision from a PA standpoint in 2019 all the way up to cameras now. So there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, but yeah, I think to sum it all up, who cares what the next guy's doing? But that doesn't mean you can't get good ideas from them. But what has God called you? What do you need to achieve your vision at a level of excellence of where you are now, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, these Facebook groups for the tech community are so great and huge, but I think you make a good point there on like use it for inspiration, but not a mandate.
Right.
Like that is not your direction from God. That's some great inspiration potentially. So then you've got a lot of gear, Jeff. So I'm assuming you're a big tech guy at this point. So we like to wrap all of our episodes with a bow on a tech takeaway of like, this is the thing that'll make your Sunday service better, which you can't say, have your father-in-law be the pastor or upgrade from the tape deck reels to red camera. So
Nice try.
that was halfway there.
Yeah, that was
8
cute.
tracks.
There we go. So what would be something that you would be like, hey, any tech, I don't care how big your church is or how small your church is, this will help you out. And you can't say relationship building because everyone's already said that like 7 times.
I already know what I'm going to say.
Perfect.
I already know what I'm going to say, and it's going to be something I don't actually have yet, which is weird.
I thought you were going to say something I don't actually do.
I thought he was
do as
gonna-
I say, not as I do.
I thought he was
Do
going to
what I
say,
say, don't do what I do.
marry the pastor's daughter, step 1.
Well,
Yes.
that's what we stole that from him. That's a
Mhm.
good step.
Yeah. So no, it's actually, I mean, I obviously do have it, but a comm system. I think obviously communication is vital. It's your number one production all the way around. We obviously do have a comm system, but it's like a 98% of the time comm system, just due to infrastructure and kind of how this building was built and some obstacles that we're up against. It's been a difficulty that we've had to overcome. But I would say before you're looking at anything else, look at your comm system, because you can have all this great gear. You can have a great PA, great video, great. Did I just say great? That's not a word.
Great.
Great.
From
Sorry,
Mesa,
That's when
Arizona.
you
Mesa.
create a great.
Yeah. You can have great like video, whatever, but if you can't communicate well and clearly, then really none of that matters, or it makes using it even more difficult. So if I had to go back and do things over, I would probably put a comm system as number one. The one that we do use, it works great for what it is. We've put a ton of time and a significant amount of money into kind of making it as stable as it can be. But if I had to do it different, I would.
You know what? Bonus question. I really, I'm listening to this back in my head and I'm thinking, how did they not ask? They spent all this time with the father-in-law. Your wife's the worship pastor. Like, does that make any weirdness? Is it make it easier,
Absolutely.
harder? Do you have to like say at home, we're not going to talk about this? Like, because a lot of worship pastors and their tech,
Careful.
a lot of worship pastor tech directors have contentious conflict, and pastor. I mean, you are really living in the conflict. So like, do you ever have any funny stories of being married to the worship pastor?
Funny stories. You put me on the spot. I can't think of one.
His work wife is literally his work wife.
Careful.
His
Careful.
work wife. Yeah. And I hope she doesn't slap me. I'm going to tread very lightly on this question. No, it's yes, my wife is basically my boss. But I think it's funny because even if we weren't married, like I think the worship pastor and the tech director is a marriage, right? Like there's going to be times where you don't agree, and that's okay. But there's going to be times where you need to trust the other one in their strengths. Like she'll come to me and like, hey, we're doing this song. And I kind of envision whatever. Now she's at a point where she like trusts, and I mean, we're married, so there's a different layer of relationship there, but I kind of envision it to look like this or sound like this, or I really don't like this there. I would prefer to hear this here, that kind of thing. So I think that relationship and kind of navigating that relationship based on strengths is just like a marriage, and we just happen to be married.
So it sounds like that's his top tip of the day is to marry the worship leader.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people
Marry
could.
the worship leader.
Lots of divorces happening right now. Okay, well, Jeff, man, we so appreciate you coming on. Like, do you have anything to plug? I mean, you want to point us to the roof church since you don't have any walls? I just had to get one more in there.
It's the roof church. That was really cheesy, but that's okay.
Well, I saved the worst for last.
No, man. I mean, I guess one thing that I plug, I always say this: we don't do everything right, but we think that what we do it with a great heart and a great mindset. We're in Mesa. We're always open doors, no pun intended, since we have no walls. If you're around, hit us up, man. Come hang out. Come shadow a Sunday. We host a ton of concerts, ton of stuff like that. So, find me on the gram, email, whatever it may be. Drop by. Would love to have you.
Love it. Drop in those DMs and talk about some gear. Well, it's great having you on the show, Jeff. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. And hey, congratulations on surviving Sunday. If you happen to make it through next Sunday as well, join us again for your weekly Tech Breather.
Blake, I do feel like our wives are our bosses as well.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
My wife makes all the money.
yeah, and my wife is
Controls all the
better at everything and prettier, and I like to say that's the only reason I have friends is because my wife is married to me.
Toby, I literally have a quote in my long quote doc where your sister-in-law says, Shelly's awesome, but Toby, you're still creepy. She said that when we were on a gear run in Texas.
That sounds like my sister. I wonder if my sister would also, if she had advice for our listeners, what it would be.
I think she would say, listen, Toby's, he's the creepy uncle. He needs a win. And a win would be if you bought some gear from him with the discount code podcast, because you'll get 11% off, which is the highest discount we have. And I didn't ask Toby for approval on this, so use it while it's alive.
No, and you're fired for that.
But hey, podcast code for any kind of gear, churchgear.com.